he speaks Tibbs. He says what Tibbs is very rough around the edges, and I think Brunson can translate that really well. And in layman's terms, it then becomes like, all right, yeah, that he gets it. It's Tibbs on the court, but it's not Tibbs because he's a little less gruff. So I like it.
So I kind of want to pick your brain, Jeremy, in terms of heading into this season. The Knicks finished 37-45, 11th in the NBA Eastern Conference. And I just want to get your perspective headed into this season and just seeing a little bit of Jalen Brunson, Summer League, any other observations you might have seen just through the offseason. What is your outlook of the Knicks just heading into the season in a couple of weeks? Are you more optimistic, less optimistic? Like, where do you see kind of this team falling in this kind of unpredictable Eastern Conference?
So I'm not excited for the season, but there was something about how this offseason unfolded where I thought the Knicks made a legitimate upgrade. I have been a huge fan of Brunson. I've been wanting the Knicks to sign him for, I think, going back to like January of 2021. I really loved his game. And obviously the connection with him and Leon Rose was there, but just something about finding a point guard who can actually orchestrate and run an offense would be beautiful. And he took those next steps in the playoffs, and he's been fantastic. But there was something about the almost could haves that didn't work. It was so frustrating to say, okay, they're trading up for Ivy. Oh, well, it's actually not happening. And it didn't. And then, oh, there's Donovan Mitchell. And, oh, well, that's actually not happening. And then it didn't. And it makes you feel empty because this is what I believe to be a better team than last year. I think last year's team, if you look at how many games the Knicks lost because of, in my opinion, coaching, there's just some poor rotations and end of games were not managed well. And the Knicks themselves did not have consistent point guard play. And I just look at it, it's like, all right, well, every team kind of takes a step back. But the way I see it is that the Knicks did take a step forward. The only problem is a lot of other teams in the East took steps forward as well. So I'm a little bit more, even though I'm not excited about this squad, I think there is enough optimism where I can get there. It's just Knicks fans, because we are so desperate for a star. I don't mean that in the way it's like you have to get him a star in the building no matter what. You want to be a little bit more calculated than that. But I think the general feeling is that this is a team that has the potential to be fun, maybe make some quiet noise, so to speak, in the play-in first round. But without that high ceiling, it's like kind of, is this a purgatory type situation? What is the angle to take that next step? And so I want to focus on this season, but it's hard to do that and also not consider what the long-term looks like.
You mentioned your excitement for Jalen Brunson. What have you seen of him so far on the court and off the court in terms of dealing with the Knicks fan base? I mean, it's pretty obvious the Knicks have, probably one of the most hardcore fan bases in all of sports. So how has he acclimated towards that? How do you think he'll perform when eventually, there's going to be some games where he doesn't play well and there's going to be tons of criticism? How do you think he'll handle that?
He seems to have a great handle on it. Every interview that I've followed of his, he just says the right thing every single time. And I think that what I was so excited about was he's so good in the pick and roll. And the Knicks have run a lot of pick and roll. When you have someone like Mitchell Robinson, who is an incredible rim running threat, and you're able to then space the floor around him, then it works out beautifully. The question, of course, is, are the Knicks able to effectively space out? Randall, of course, was a very large question mark. And I'm a little bit encouraged by how his role is. I'd like to think that the reason he was so present in the office, so much of a focal point last year, is because he felt he had to take on the responsibility, not because he wanted to. And he's able to slide back into a role where he's able to just do less than I think he does more in that sense. But yeah, really getting the spacing around him, because the Knicks don't have the best floor spacing, but they've got guys who can do a lot of good things. So I'd say that's probably the number one thing. But he speaks Tibbs. He says what Tibbs is very rough around the edges, and I think Brunson can translate that really well. And in layman's terms, it then becomes like, all right, yeah, that he gets it. It's Tibbs on the court, but it's not Tibbs because he's a little less gruff. So I like it.
Jeremy, I think kind of one of I don't know, maybe cliche narratives around Brunson when New York acquired him was, well, you're going to see a drop off because he was playing next to Luka Doncic in Dallas. How do you see his potential this year? I mean, do you see? I mean, of course, he's going to get a higher usage rate. Do you think what you're seeing so far in preseason, he's going to like rise above expectations, or where do you kind of see him fitting? I mean, you described some of that just now, but kind of elaborate on that. What do you see his potential as a point guard overall?
One of the things that really encouraged me in terms of wanting to sign Brunson was that the net rating that he had with Luka on the court versus off the court, it was actually better when Luka was off the court. And it's not like those minutes were a huge discrepancy. There was a legitimate sample size for both. And so that was great to consider where moving forward, if you're not going to be playing with one of the best players in the NBA, how are you going to do? And, it's just preseason. I couch a lot of the things that I see until like maybe the 10 game mark, just because it's less individual data points. You could start to put something together. But yeah, it's just honestly the bar is also so low in terms of a Knicks point guard that just having Brunson there, it feels like a home run, even if he's just a very good player. Just having someone who can penetrate and finish at an elite level, that's just not something I can recall. I mean, probably Marbury. That's probably the last person who is
Wow.
anywhere close
Yeah.
to that in a consistent basis. And it's going to be a joy to actually watch someone who knows how to run an offense. But yeah, it's great to have someone who you can feel is confident enough to do that. And I don't remember, because Marbury was so long ago, I don't remember a lot of when that has been able to happen.
Yeah, and another narrative from last season, of course, Julius Randle kind of taking a step back. I mean, he had an awesome season the season before that. Do you see Brunson being able to elevate his game, like in the pick and roll as partners there? Or who do you see him having the biggest impact as far as the rest of the offensive side of the ball for the Knicks?
Yeah, I'm inclined to say Randall, because Randall was such a detriment that if you can find a way to limit what caused Randall to do so poorly last year, then that in itself is a major positive. And so, like, if 20% of the players on the court at one point are stinking up the joint and then they're not doing that, then that alleviates so much. But I just think with RJ, the ability for RJ to really take that next step, his usage rate is probably going to go up as well as I would imagine Randall's ticks down. RJ signed a contract. I am a big fan of the contract. I
Me too.
wouldn't necessarily have loved to see RJ get a max deal because he's not a max player. But like with the whole Tyler Hero situation, the salary cap's going to go up. It's not going to be this albatross, but for a couple of years, it just might not look great. But if you're Miami, do you really care about it? But I digress. If RJ is able to then come into his own, it really helps solidify where, to go to kind of the ceiling of the team, he does so much where, in my mind, don't bank on him being an elite first option, because it's really hard to find that. And you hope that he's a fantastic second option. But again, if you bank on him just being like a really solid third scoring option who can do stuff on both sides of the ball, and he pops more than that, then you're in a good situation. But so I guess lower expectations and under promise, over deliver, so to speak. But I think RJ is the one who's really going to benefit from Brunson.
I want to add to Matt's point about Julius Randle, because he was such a focal point. Like Matt said 2 seasons ago, you really saw just the attention on him. He just seemed to play with such enthusiasm. And last season, we saw what happened. What are the fans' attitude towards him? Is it kind of like a do or die situation? Like, is he feeling more pressure compared to maybe his peers, maybe on other teams? Like, do you get a sense of like how his attitude is heading into the season at all?
I think the Knicks fans are at the point where it's all right, he's here, so let's just hope for the best. And I think it is for the best. It took me a while to say I really don't want to move Randall, but not to attach a first round pick. And then I finally broke in September after the Donovan Mitchell trade ensued. It's like, all right, well, if you can use the 2025 protected Bucks first, that's fine. I would be cautious about other stuff, but the Knicks their front office has kind of just shown we're comfortable waiting this out because we know that we're not going to make any major noise. So we might as well just not shoot ourselves in the foot down the line. But yeah, I'd like to think that he is more accepting of the role. He knows that last year didn't work. He knows that Knicks fans are not in his corner. And, I think New Yorkers forgive but don't forget. And all he has to do, there are two things. Number one, just come out and play well. That's the easiest one. Number two, just embrace the villain role, where it's like, all right, a lot of teams have those guys where you don't love them, but there's something about them where they've got that thing that just kind of attracts you to them. I don't know, but I don't think he'll go in that direction. He's very professional and he says all the right things. So less is more for him. That's really all it is. And making his shots.
Absolutely. What have you seen lately from Obi Toppin? I mean, he had that incredible in-game dunk against the Pacers, I believe it was, right? What are you seeing from his potential role on this team and his growth as well? I mean, I saw you guys maybe talking a bit about some six-man buzz. How do you see his growth this season?
It all depends on Julius. The way I kind of view it is because Tibbs wants 48 minutes of rim protection. So if he doesn't trust Obi to be a 5 and play small, and he doesn't really, and if he doesn't trust Randall to be a 5, and he does because of the fact that it's more about screening than anything, but having them together, and Tibbs made what I think was actually a very good point, where the net rating of Obi and Julius together is very good, but the games that were garbage time take up a lot of that positive net rating. So when you parse it out a little bit more, there's a challenge. But I think the problem for Knicks fans is, Obi looks great. How do you find a way to get him on the court if you're not reducing Julius's minutes? And I do think ultimately Julius might go back down to, 32, 31 minutes a game, probably closer to 33. But the way I see it is it's like, is it going to be 48 minutes minus Julius Randle's minutes equals Obi Toppin's minutes? And if that's the case, you just can't do it. I mean, he's the 8th pick overall, and he's entering his 3rd year. And I think the Knicks would move Julius if they found the right deal. But at the same time, if Julius is playing well, I wonder how much they consider moving him. And if Julius isn't playing well, I wonder how much they would really care to add in order to move him. So none of this is going to happen before the deadline likely anyway. But I want Obi to have a role. I just don't know what it is based on how the team is structured and mainly how Tibbs coaches rotations.
Yeah, and that was definitely going to be my next question is, with Julius being on a little bit of a different timeline than the rest of the talent on this roster, I mean, could it be something where if he really shows high performance through a couple weeks, they look to just cash out on that and get whatever they can, whether it's draft assets or a role player, do you think there's enough, I guess, incentive to play the young guys together, which is also dangerous to move away from veterans, that they would cash out on a move like that?
I do think the Knicks would want to move Julius, but the struggle is, so with Mitchell Robinson, I mean, he's incredibly low usage. He's just essentially a play finisher. It's interesting that he's doing more post up, and I'll believe he shoots a 3 or at least a perimeter shot when I see it, but that's apparently what he's been working on. If you move Randall, and to me, it's like, well, what are you moving Randall for? Because you're probably not going to get expiring salary. I mean, you could try for it, but if it's expiring salary, is it bad expiring salary? Because you're not going to get a point guard to play ahead of Brunson. The Knicks want to put Grimes in a position to succeed, but Fournier's on the team. No one's going to be playing ahead of RJ. The goal would be to move Obi up. So if you're trading Randall, and then, what are you doing at the 5? Are you keeping Mitch? I think if you pair Obi and if you pair Mitch, there's not enough creation. There's not enough high usage that can be there. It's almost like you have to move Mitch and Randall in order to insert Obi into the starting lineup. But then there's the question of who's at the 5. Are you promoting Hartenstein? Are you looking for another player? I mean, obviously, DeAndre Ayton, the situation in Phoenix is crazy. So, Is that something that you're thinking of doing? That type of move. I really don't know, but that's why to me it's so fascinating to see how Obi fits in, because there are things he can do that I think are really beneficial, but he has to be paired with the right players in the front court around him. And as things stand, I don't think that's Mitchell Robinson.